Yes, brilliant. Morning. Hey, my name is Jordy, CEO of Red Ninja Studios. Thanks indeed for inviting me to speak today. First of all, I would like to quickly touch upon what Red Ninja is and does before going into the Internet of Things and smart networks stuff we have been doing over the past 3 years. We are a technology company, an SME. We are with 11 people at the moment, with the 14 of us from the 1st of July, so a couple of days left. We essentially develop software as well as work with hardware. So who are we? A design-led technology company, we like to call ourselves, because we understand that if you do not design whatever kind of solution you are to develop in a way that the end user actually wants to use it, then what's the point of using it? And especially, of course, I'm sure we all have apps on our phone which we like to use once or twice, and then you just simply stop using them. So we'd like to avoid that and develop solutions that actually solve a present need and which people would like to keep on using. So therefore, several of my team at the moment actually design to make sure that the design of those products is absolutely spot on. We also do web application development, so both front end as well as the complex back end stuff. We're very strongly debate big data analytics, which is not completely fair because we essentially cover everything from the ability to deploy sensors, so we can start capturing data, store it, process it, and modeling it. All the way up to visualizing that data to ensure that we can actually start doing quite some cool stuff with the data that we capture. I'll mention a couple of examples later. And I've also mentioned co-creation, which we'll come back to in a minute. In terms of the key markets that we address, mainly health, transport as well as education and retail. Of course, health and transport are two big verticals for the UK government, so a lot of money is being invested into this area, therefore it makes sense for companies like ourselves to invest our efforts into these verticals. The main business opportunities we address are the Internet of Things, big data and smart cities, as well as sensor technology and mobile commerce services, which will be clarified a little later on. So coming back to the last bullet point, co-creation, what that basically means is that in order to develop solutions, so technology-enabled solutions, let's say software, that people actually want to use, we make sure that we develop those, let's just say, applications together with the end user. So to give you an idea, over the past 6 months, we've developed this particular app, which with 35 to 40 young adults, together with those partners below. And for this app we focused on tackling mental health issues, because we obviously realized that especially depression, isolation is a big issue for young adults. So over a period of 6 months we sat down with them a couple of times a month to ask them, listen, what is it that you guys would need? What would help you to solve these mental health issues? After those 6 months we ended up producing an app which essentially allows you to select your feeling. So, is it great, obviously brilliant, but is it awful? Then it would lead you to several other screens which would allow you to jot things down. So just, okay, what are your issues? Would you like to share that with your mom and dad or with a friend? Would you like to call a professional, or would you simply like to call a good friend to discuss your issues? And because we co-created this app with those young adults, it basically would ensure that it actually helps them in their daily lives. And it's an app they come back to every single week. It only has been live now for for 3 weeks now, and there's 300 users already. So it shows you that the value of doing this. Similarly, with a group of elderly people between 55 and 90 years old, we developed an application to tackle isolation as well, but then among elderly. So after several workshops, it's the same process. We set them down, asked them, listen, what is it that you would like? What is it that you really need to make sure that you don't simply sit at home, feel isolated, and eventually depressed? One of the things that we have done for them is deploy very cheap tablets, which were pre-programmed with 3 very simple apps. One was online shopping, just to make sure that that's covered for them. The second one was Skype, to get in touch with family, friends who do not always live nearby, and the third one was to be programmed by us for them, but essentially a personalized app based on their personal preferences. And by talking to them, as you see over there, we get a good understanding of what it is that they like. So little things in the beginning, we simply said shopping, but then they said, no, we don't want to read this. We would like a shopping trolley as a symbol. That makes it easier for us to read. Okay, what kind of colors do we need? Does it need to be black or blue or green? Well, together with them, we tease all of this out, and now it's something which they actually like to use and does not make things any more complicated. So back to the Internet of Things, which is obviously why we're here today. Remedial was part of one of the Internet of Things demonstrators, obviously funded by the Technology Strategy Board. Our cluster was led by ARM, as well as several other partners, as you see. The Internet of Things demonstrator, for those of you who do not know, was essentially focused on creating interoperability between datasets, and through various clusters by combining various datasets, various solutions were delivered at the end of these projects. In our case, we focused on combining and on the interoperability of several companies who had datasets available, and we were using these datasets to produce their products, but felt that because they could not share this data and because their infrastructure as well as their projects as well as the datasets were so closed and could not be shared, this actually limited their growth. So one of the main deliverables out of this cluster was HyperCAD. And HyperCAD is essentially, you could see it as a dashboard which focuses on interoperability, which pulls in various data sets and makes these interoperable so they can be shared, interpreted by basically anyone, and therefore used for a variety of purposes. In terms of, if I would have to describe the Internet of Things stack or the ecosystems we are in at the moment, then I would place HyperCAD in the middle. You know now what they do, which pull their data in from smaller companies, Internet of Things based companies like Enlight. Enlight is specialized in smart street technology, obviously to reduce costs, enhance energy efficiency. And AlertMe is a company specialized in home automation. So HyperCAD pulls in these data sets, makes them interoperable for companies like ourselves to use. But before we actually can start using them, you need companies like FlexEye. FlexEye is a company who basically focus on what they would call decision making or ruling engines, which basically means that, okay, so you've got a data set, you've got a bit of technology. So let's say you've got a motion sensor which knows that as soon as you walk into the room, it actuates the lighting system and flips on the light. When you walk out of the room, it makes sure that the lights switch off. But what does actually decide when you need to switch off that light and when you need to switch it on? It's a simple thing to say, but obviously for a machine to be able to do that, it's quite difficult. And they are focused on developing a kind of command system, if you like, to make sure that that's absolutely spot on. And then we are at the top of the stack. So by going through this cluster with companies like ARM and HyperCAD, we're actually at the forefront of being able to use data which is made interoperable through HyperCAD, and to then use that for applications which solve problems or increase quality of life. So essentially you could look at Red Ninja Studios as a company who uses its data analytic skills to develop data-driven applications. Give you a couple of examples which will clarify this for you. Last year we kickstarted a FP7 project funded by the European Commission, which involves the deployment of a sensor network to Liverpool city centre. And what these sensors do is they establish movement patterns of individuals. So what that basically means is that because we can track people anonymously, we therefore get an understanding of the flow of people as well as traffic through Liverpool city centre. We can use that to develop an application which can be used by policymakers, let's say the local transport authority, to make informed decisions as to, okay, so we would like to relocate a bus station, but where do you move it to? You need real-time data for that to be able to say, okay, so this is how people move through our city centre, so that is where we will place the bus station. Similar decisions related to urban design, resilience, all need to be based on real-time data. Another example, which we have been and are conducting with the University of Liverpool, is what we call a smart campus. I think it's a term we've all heard of. And And equally, with this project, we developed sensors which allowed us to get an understanding of the flow of students, both indoors and outdoors. Based on that, we were able to develop applications that solved present needs for students. So a very simple one was, for example, that students were not able to find the right classroom. You know, think of freshers, but also think of exam weeks. You know, they simply, because the campus is so big, they can't find the right building. And if they can find the right building, you know, it's still a massive building, so lead me to the room. So with the use of these sensors, and of course, but also by pulling in the existing university data sets, we were able to develop an application that allows them to basically do this. So the idea of the application that you see here, think of yourself as a fresher. What it would do is it would send you a notification in the morning. Good morning, Peter. Tomorrow morning your first lecture starts in the architecture building. Mrs. Smith will be there to guide you, press on directions to then lead you to the actual classroom from your dorm room. So the idea is the same. We deploy sensors, we collect data, combine them with existing data sets to then develop value-added applications for the end user. Another example is a project we are doing with the Liverpool One Shopping Centre, obviously a dominant shopping centre in Liverpool. And we just kickstarted a TFB-funded feasibility study actually to develop what we would call an holistic mobile commerce proposition. And what that basically means is that because people order online more and come to the high street less to shop, you need something that almost attracts people back, don't you? Otherwise, you know, you simply wouldn't go. So what if you would have an app that would allow you with the initial planning? So let's say you need a kettle on a Saturday afternoon. Okay, then it needs to be very easy to be able to search for kettles that you like within, let's just say, Liverpool One Shopping Centre in this case. It would need to enable you to take care of your travel management. How do you get to the high street? Do you go by bus? If so, from where? Do you drive by car? If so, where do you park? It would be an app that also takes care of your in-store experience to make sure that you like it so much to be in the high street that you would stay there and you would like to spend as much time as possible, as well as taking care of your return travel. And the main reason that we conducted a feasibility study at the moment is to obviously get an idea of how we can realize such an application with all of those phases, but also to enable an organization like Liverpool One to get an enhanced understanding of the movement patterns of their shoppers. So again, we've deployed sensors which then populate an analytics dashboard for Liverpool One Shopping Centre that shows them this batch of customers, let's say, or shoppers, clearly likes high-end shops and high-end restaurants. So there's no need to send them discount vouchers for McDonald's, for example, because this is what they do based on their movement patterns and their preferences. So it allows Liverpool One Shopping Centre to profile the consumers better. And the actual applications obviously allows the shopper to have an enhanced experience and to make coming back to the high street a bit more fun. And finally, a project I'd like to touch upon is a project we are doing with more independent, obviously part of Dallas. And what we do here is essentially helping users to take control over their own data. So we, of course, it's very topical, but if we would be able to develop a solution which is very easy to use for everyone, which would allow you to decide whether you would like to share your personal health records with your clinicians, whether it's a GP or any third party really, then obviously it should be up to you to say yes or no. And together with them we are essentially developing a dashboard together with, let's just say, a tool for you to use to make sure that you can take, that you can manage your personal health records. Brilliant. That's it for me. If you have any questions, please feel free.
Thanks, Jordy. One question, I said before you escape. Personal data. Do you have issues around the provenance of using personal information? Do you have the Information Commissioner's Office breathing down your neck, or how do you deal with that?
No, the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I mentioned tracking people. Well, we do that anonymously, so I wouldn't actually know, it's Richard, but I would know, how you would actually behave within, a certain space. So besides, it's also obviously important to make sure that you are able to keep up with the latest developments within the privacy regulation space. So what we do, for example, we work very closely with the Connected Digital Economy Catapult.
Yep.
We're very strong, obviously, on developing a new kind of framework that would allow people to take charge of their own data, protect their own data, as well as to protect them against companies like ourselves who would like to use their data, which is fine, but to ensure that's only in the pursuit of people's own interests. So, you just have to make sure that you play by the rules, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Please.
Hi, Jordy. I was just interested in your relationship with Hypercat.
Sure.
In terms of extracting value from multiple data sources, which you're obviously using to power your applications, how big a challenge is aggregating data from multiple sources with multiple file formats? How are you doing that? Are you using semantic technologies or?
Precisely, yeah. No, that's spot on, yeah. So obviously it's a great help that the data sets are made interoperable by Hypercat. But then it's up to us indeed to use semantic web technology to make sure that we aggregate those data sets to be able to actually use them and to then power applications.
And
so,
how
yes.
would you say, what sort of split is there between structured and unstructured data in those third-party sort of data sets?
All right, well, one of the...
Is unstructured data a big opportunity that's got big problems in terms of
yeah, the answer is
indexing
yes.
it? Or?
Sure, yeah, no, well, both really, it has got massive opportunities, but, it also produces massive challenges. So one of the reasons that, last week was obviously Internet of Things Week, and one of the reasons that the UK government is pushing this Hypercat at the moment, so they want everyone to start using it, basically.
What is Hypercat? Sorry, is it a company or is it a government?
No, Hypercat is, the company that developed it is 1248, as part of that Internet of Things cluster, which I referred to before, some collaboration with ourselves and several others. And what it essentially is, without getting too technical.
Don't do that.
Sorry?
Don't do that.
Don't do that, right. You can look at it as a very simple specification that allows applications to automatically navigate for service APIs. What that basically means, historically, if someone would like to develop a certain application, then you will make sure that bit of software or the API to ensure that the links to the data set would all be nicely organized, and therefore that data would power that application. These days it's a bit more complicated. So with the use of this Hypercat, it essentially allows you to take out of the human aspect of having to code that relationship between the data set and the application, but it allows the machine to do that for you. Okay. So that's essentially the value of Hypercat. So it's interoperability, but also taking away the human part of having to code it yourself and doing that automatically.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So.
Hi, Jordy. Thinking about the Smart Campus and the Smart Liverpool One programs, how much of an obstacle to your deployment of sensors would you see the availability or the currency of the data about the centre itself has been?
What's that, sorry?
The actual information about the centre itself, floor plans, the arrangements of buildings, the occupancy of the various units. How much of an obstacle to the deployment of a programme like that would the currency or even availability of that information be?
Well, the answer is really that you have to collaborate really closely with either university or Liverpool Shopping Centre. So because they see the value of collecting the data and they see the value of the applications that we will power by combining the data, they're more than happy to collaborate on this. You're absolutely right. Of course, there's always the question, listen, let's say the university is an example. Okay, so you will be collecting data about the real-time movement of our students. Do we really feel comfortable, providing you with the data or allowing you to capture the data? But if you explain that, take the UK border agency issues, for example, students coming to, people coming to the UK, 250,000 to be precise, with the reason to study, whereas this is not always the case. Then they see, what capturing the data and obviously the tool that you will be developing for them can actually add to them in terms of value. So as long as you ensure that the that whatever you're trying to create actually benefits the end user, whether it is the university itself or students or staff members, then they're happy to engage in these kind of activities. And of course, there's a lot of R&D that has been done over the past couple of months. And I think that if you look at the Internet of Things space, in general, but once again, if you clearly engage those organizations and clarify the benefits, then they're happy to support you in doing that.
Do you see it as a pull then from those types of organisations for you to provide those services, or is it something that you're having to actively sell to them?
I think it's the co-creation I touched upon before. That's what underpins everything. So I would hate to be a pushy salesman that goes in and says this is what you need, and if you go to the IT department of the uni, so like, listen guys, open it up now, because it's not the way it works. Obviously, you have to. We didn't start this project with the university after a year of let's call it a feasibility study, to make sure that we engaged the university in a process in which we essentially assessed all the direct needs of students, staff members, operational / efficiency needs. So because you kickstarted a journey together, then it makes more sense to then develop a solution together. So now that's, but it takes a long time. It's understanding what the end user wants, of course, and we simply choose to take the time out to sit down with these. Obviously, this time it's not being paid for. It's just time we invest because we believe that at the end of the day we will produce products which actually solve the problem.
All right.
Thanks
very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I run a company called Ames Grid Services. We're a technology business based here in the Northwest. We're a cloud services provider, whatever that is. And what we actually do is we build data centres. We build large-scale data centres here in the Northwest. We have our main campus here in Liverpool, but we also have data centres in London, and we have an office down there. We build bespoke clouds, really. We're very much into both the Internet of Things and big data, because we build cloud services kind of thing. So the analogy I draw, we build the digital shovels of the digital gold rush. So we sell shovels. So we're a cloud service provider. We build bespoke clouds for certain verticals. And the main verticals are health informatics, media, transport and logistics, and in financial services. But then that's the economy of the UK. Those four sectors are large parts of the economy of the UK. Point of my talk, what I was going to say, and you don't miss anything, I'll circulate the slides. The slides are just some pictorial demonstrations of what is meant by the Internet of Things, and then what we're doing in the Internet of Things. And the point of what I wanted to get across in this talk was really that it's about two things in my view. It's about understanding a context, an opportunity. Okay, so there's something happening that represents an opportunity, and then it's what approach you take to seize that opportunity. Because if you look at the Internet of Things space, okay, the machine-to-machine data, it is huge. There's any amount of data, as we saw in the keynote presentation. There's any amount of data, and there's any amount of things that you can do with that data. What we've tried to focus on is identifying major kind of challenges, things that are happening in our life, in our economy, in our society, whatever, and then ways of actually dealing with those issues and creating value. Because as I say, there's lots of things you can do, there's lots of data, but what actually creates value? And they're the things that you can monetize, and they're the things that you can grow, we can grow our economy with, and that's kind of the mission we're on. So as I say, there's two parts to what we do. What's the driver, and how do you create value out of that opportunity? The structure for doing that, the way we do that is if you look at all the areas of the Internet of Things, the Internet of Things is a huge explosion of every device and every human, it's the Internet of everything, some people describe it as, has effectively if you like, a point of presence on the Internet. And all that data can now be used and sourced and integrated in some kind of brave new world. The key to the internet, as the question somebody just raised there, is around the interoperability. Because we've been taking data from sensors from back in the day, 200 years we've been collecting information about things. Really, the way I characterise to the guy in the pub about, so what's the internet of things? How is that different from just the kind of sensing we've been doing on buildings, on cars, in hospitals for decades? It is bringing that together now. It's the interoperability of that data and combining those data sets. And the examples I'll give hopefully will illustrate the value of doing that. It's the combining it. So it's that interoperability. And Jordy mentioned the HyperCat project, which was a way of getting a whole series of Internet of Things demonstrator projects. TSB last year funded 8 demonstrator projects in the UK to demonstrate the potential for the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, as with big data, is seen by the government, by the politicians, as one of the things that's going to transform our economy. That's what the 21st century value economy is going to be, making more use and creating value out of this particular data opportunity around things connected to the internet. So there are 8 of them, and one of the pieces of work that went on was the HyperCat, which is basically a catalogue. It's basically a catalogue of the data sources. So making it easy to combine data from one part of the country with data from another, data from one domain to another. And a lot of that technology, the standardizing of APIs and so on, and how data is already there. So it's a movement. We're on a journey to that movement where all these various areas. We focused, the 4 examples I just wanted to give you quickly is are really all from one domain. So, you could argue that's not terribly interoperable, but I'm much more modest in my ambition as I become elderly. I'm much more sort of modest in my ambition in that I think what we're starting to do is to combine areas within domains and get value out of that before I work out how my heart monitor when I'm on the bus is going to talk to my kettle at all, kind of thing. And we can all dream with those things, but I'm not sure the huge value proposition, the early term wins in terms of value proposition are necessarily from quite such a so we focused on transport. The reason we focused on transport rather than health or rather than energy is just the structure of the transport marketplace. Health in this country is dominated by a particular £800 gorilla. Energy is dominated by large corporate kind of thing. I think the market for small businesses and where we will see most of the initial uptake in IoT are in areas like transport, where the market is slightly less structured and less infrastructure or entity dominated kind of thing. So that's the background. So the 4 examples that we do, and I say bear in mind we've coordinated these projects because we provide cloud services, and there's a value proposition for the people who provide the cloud infrastructure. So the first project was one of these 8 demonstrators. The project was called iMove. And go back to the point of my talk is, you've got to find what's the context and what's the opportunity. So the context of the iMove project was that we are increasingly seeing congestion corridors. Everybody in this room will recognise the idea that we live in a world where there are congestion corridors. The whole of the country isn't congested yet, but we live in a world where certain corridors, that bridge up the road there is a congestion corridor, the M25 is a congestion corridor, the A14 is a congestion. We have very specific corridors of congestion. Now, how we deal with that in a modern world is a challenge. Good example in Liverpool, we are building a new port. We heard about Liverpool 1, which is shopping centre. The Liverpool 2 project is an in-river terminal to take what are called post-Panamax vessels. That's going to grow the port and grow the western side of the UK because of what's happening in the Panama Canal. Now, we're going to go from 800 containers a day to 3,000 containers a day. How do you think the roads in and out of an old port city like Liverpool are going to cope with that? We're either going to spend about 12 billion on a new 12-lane highway, yeah, right? Or we're going to do smarter things about the way we schedule congestion corridors. Basically 3 routes into Liverpool, isn't it? There's the north, There's the route from the sort of northeast, there's the route from the east, there's the route from the southeast, and those corridors can be better coordinated. So that project basically took a whole series of data sets, data like the UTMC, if anyone's familiar with the way traffic data. See, the traffic in our cities is known because the people who manage the traffic, which are the local authorities, have systems around monitoring the traffic lights and the induction sensors. So we have data about the traffic. There's an interesting question. Who owns that data? Well, the people own that data. The local authority must own that data. Well, they do, but they don't actually own it because they've subcontracted it, as in all of our modern world, they've subcontracted to some intermediary who manage it on behalf of the city council. So you go to the people who manage the data. But of course, they don't have the data either. The data is actually owned by somebody. It's actually owned by Siemens. Criticism of Siemens. It's actually owned by Siemens. So who has the data? Who owns the data? Who's responsible for the data? So they were some of the things that we've been mapping out. So how do you get hold of that data? And when you've got hold of it, how do you merge that data with, say, off-call mobile data? If you track all mobile devices are either on-call or off-call. If they're off-call, you can track, or on-call, you can track exactly where they are. If they're off-call, you can also track where they are. So you can get data about where people are. So we combine that data, we combine GPS data from trucks and so on. You can start to build a picture of our congestion corridor, and you can focus on that. If we're going to get value, that's where you can create value. So what's the value proposition? Who's going to pay for that? The local authorities, are they going to? Yeah, right, they're going to pay, aren't they? The current climate. So who's going to pay for the value proposition? Well, of course we are. I pay for that. If I'm going to cross the Runcorn Bridge and I know it's congested, they're about to build a new bridge here, so that's going to cause more congestion there. So around that proposition, there is a value proposition to the people who are building the bridge, there's a value proposition to people who use the bridge, who will pay for the services around that. So it's identifying an area like that, congestion corridors, who are the people who would pay to be able to access that, and then how do you develop the services? So what we've done in all of these projects, we've aggregated data sets, we've built platforms for the data sets to be made available, and then we've encouraged app developers, innovative businesses like RevNinja, to be able to come forward and develop new services. That isn't happening of its own devices, because often that value proposition, there's some heavy lifting to be done before you can get into the position where you can start to really innovate. Second project, say the fourth is a quickly run through. The second one is a European Space Agency funded project looking specifically at the port. It's not just Liverpool, it's Liverpool, Tilbury, Southampton, Felixstowe, and then two ports, Bremerhaven, Wilhelmshaven in Germany. And what we're looking at is the sequencing of vehicles and vessels into a port. Now, at the moment, that's a classic supply chain problem. There is data about the arrival of vessels. There is data about the booking times of the port, the availability of slots at the port. There is data about the containers. There's data about the jobs. There's data about where the vehicle is. You bring that data together, you merge that data, you can provide new innovative services. A classic one is real-time vehicle booking. So that the port operator knows when the vehicle is going to arrive. So all the vehicles don't arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning so they can all get away before they beat the traffic, but of course they, by doing that, all create a kind of congestion. So there's another area where bringing disparate data sources together, but it was driven by one particular driver, and the driver in that case is that we are going to see more and more congested ports in this country, which is a good thing. Broadly, it's a good thing for our economy. The Panama Canal is opening for the first time next year. The Panama Canal has effectively been closed for the last 40 years. So for the first time from 2015, we're going to see circumnavigation of the world again. So the traffic from the trading partners in the east is going to come through from the west now, and that opens up a whole new opportunity for the UK. The growth of the post-Panamax, these post-Panamax vessels are 18,000 TEU. Current vessels are about 5,000 TEU. So the world is going to get, trade is going to grow, the oceans are going to be, and a small maritime nation on the west coast of Europe is probably very well placed again to be able to do that, if we can get these bloody things in and out of our ports, and we can get enough trucks along the A14 to service it. Third project, just to give you a flavour of this, and there's only 4 of these, I'll finish in a minute. Third project is a project with the rail industry. Here again, classical industry, runs at a kind of an engineering clock speed, broadly being left behind by the digital revolution. And apologies to any rail industry is very well run in this country, very well regulated and so on. But in terms of digital innovation, it probably hasn't really got to the races. So again, some money's been put together by the Rail Industry Board and the government to stimulate digital. So what's the issue there? So what's the context? The issue there, again, is capacity on the track, isn't it? That's what HS2 is all about, what HS3 is about. It's not about getting faster, taking 10 minutes off the route time from Manchester to London. It's about getting more capacity. If you look at the capacity, back to the poor old A14, look at that capacity, rail capacity into Felixstowe, every 60 seconds a train comes out of there. 60 seconds. You can't put those trains any closer than that. So we need to build more capacity. So how do we get more capacity? How do we get more capacity into our network? We do it by operating it more efficiently in some way. How do you do that? You start to join some of the dots. You start to join, for example, with passenger transport. We built some data and we built some platforms and apps where the passengers now know when the trains are running. Okay, so you can get real-time train information, but real-time alerting to people, so that people are more used to actually turning up when the train is available rather than rocking up only for it to be delayed. So minimising one of the drivers why people don't use it is because of the perception of delays and so on. If you minimise and manage that delays, and similarly on freight trains, the key there is the cut-off time. At a railhead, when the containers are being loaded onto the train, people like Freightliner, they have a cut-off window. Managing that cut-off window, now they know when the cut-off window, broadly the truckers know when the cut-off window is, but the cut-off window changes as the trains run, the lateness of the trains run. So synchronising that data, which is all the data coming off the rail track, which you've then got to put into shape to be able to use it, and linking that to the GPS data, the people who are arriving at the railhead, another area where that improves the capacity and utilisation. And you make a 15% improvement in the utilisation of those trains because we better coordinate the arrivals. That's a huge impact that this kind of world can make compared to the alternative investment. Final project is slightly further out in terms of its science, is building, and all of these relate to the same sort of issue around the port, kind of case examples I was going to give, is a project called iPredictor. And this is a project where we're looking at the tidal window in ports. You know, this is a very tidal island. We sit on a maritime shelf, so the tides are very important. Now, we know exactly when the tides are. We know when the tides are for 200 years, but the tides vary. The tides can vary in the Mersey, which is a typical tidal river. It can vary by anything up to about ½ a metre or more sometimes, depending. And it depends upon the weather. If the wind's blowing and the currents are running, and you can vary it. So does ½ a metre matter? Well, it does when you're unloading 18,000 TEU ships. Just done some analysis on the port of Singapore. The difference in a surge tide and a normal tide is about 30 seconds per container. Not a big issue if you're loading 18,000 of them. The window you have to get that ship unloaded is so there is the value proposition. There is the value. But to do that, we need to bring lots of data together. So we have tidal currents and we have models of tidal current. So there's a set of data. There's oceanographic data in those tidal models. There's meteorological data, which is another set of data which is all in models. There's a set of data which we have from the tide tables. But then there's data from machine learning. We've now put sensors in the river, particularly when you're doing things like trying to get in-river terminals or indeed wind farms. Putting that data and combining, and how do we combine those data sets to give a very simple app where they can improve the window of opportunity to get the vessel in, the vessel out. And that has a whole series of knock-on steps. What broadly vessels coming across the North Atlantic do is they sprint and loiter. They sprint to the bar and then they wait there until the tide is right to be able to do it. The fuel efficiency, and again you're talking about 15% fuel efficiency improvement in getting the vessels to be able to steam at a point where they know exactly. So there are just some examples of where the Internet of Things, by understanding an issue, looking at where a value proposition will address that issue and focusing on that, rather than the 1,000,001 things we could do. Just a couple of final points. I'm trying to remember what the final point slide is. You do need slides. I come to the conclusion this post-PowerPoint world is not all it's checked up to it. Final point, a couple of points I want to make. Point with big data, I always say, problem with big data, I thought somebody was going to say it this morning, the problem with big data to me is the postage and packing. That's the problem. You know. It's got to be stood up. So it's about an investment. Somebody defined big data to me the other day, quite well, I thought they said, it's when data, somebody kind of said this morning, it's when it's cheaper to keep the data than to throw it away. So you've got this data, but it has a cost. Storing, curating, archiving, backing, that data has a cost. And the reason we're kind of well placed in these projects is we see that cost. I see that cost right up close, the cost of creating that data storage. So we've got a number of projects in the pipeline. That's a brief insight into our sort of transport world at the moment. An area around panomics, as it's called, the proteomics, genomics, lipidomics, metabolomics, the omic world. That data, as we bring that data together, huge opportunities to connect that to pathway data, how we treat people, to the analysis data, medical imaging, and so working with some people down at the Heart Hospital in London, looking at how you bring proteomic data, analysis data, and lifestyle data together, and that's the future of how we will treat ourselves in this. But there's a model got to be built. You've got to identify what's the problem you're going to do. Cardiovascular disease, biggest killer in Europe, biggest single killer in Europe. So there's a huge value proposition. What is it you can do by combining that data? And you've got to have a clear view of that, because, as I said, you've got to pay for the infrastructure. Sorry, Richard, it wasn't quite the presentation I sent you last night.
That was cracking.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Well done. The takeaway I got from that, PowerPoint, who needs it?
Yeah.
You're genuine truth to stuff.
Yeah. Over it.
It's figuring out the why.
Yeah.
Why you're going to do this.
Yeah.
When you do that, all else falls into space. Yeah, I love the sort of serendipitous, let's get all the big data in a pile and figure out and put it up. But
you can do that, and there is a role for that. I was just trying to point a little bit of sort of contrast to that. There is a role for that. Some of the greatest advances we made and will make come from people just spotting it. But an awful lot of this can be, there is a problem. How could that problem be solved by better access to data? And there are big advances we get. I think this is the age we're in. I think the fishing trip. There are other groups of people. Universities will be looking in a slightly more broader way at things, and there will be great advances will come from that. Some of the patterns you see from data. Prescription data, that was a good example last year. Looking at the patterns on prescription data has shown some things. So data science and analytics has a big place to play in sort of serendipitous, but I think we've been driving this simply because in these early days somebody's got to stand it. Somebody's got to build the lakes, somebody's got to fill the lakes with fish. That all costs, and you can't just do that. I think from a commercial point of view, you've got to do that with the goal in mind. Sorry.
Very interested in the context of the transport stuff you're talking about. So, when you're building these individual apps, so you're solving specific problems that you talked about around tide, around bottlenecks in transport. Are you building with an eye on the future in a kind of service-oriented way, where you could see a dynamic, re-optimized supply chain, where you're actually looking to what's in individual containers and rerouting ships based on a combination of what you add from the work you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, it's exactly that. The layering. The point I'm trying to make is that there's often an initial kind of killer app. And as I say, with all the stuff that's going on with the port, the thing that has caught their attention, engaged the port, is dynamic vehicle booking. Something that if you go to Tesco's RDCs have been doing this for years. You get a 10-minute slot, we know when you're going to arrive, it'll dynamically reschedule. They've not been able to do that because the data sets have been disparate and it's about power in the supply chain and all that kind of stuff. So you take that on then, you can then start to look at temperature monitoring. There's a whole series of other things, but it doesn't start with visioning what you can do. It starts, we found, by getting some very clear cross the stakeholder engagement around a particular problem, and from that you can then build. On the rail apps, there's a whole series of things being layered on that you can get, alerting passengers for when the train is running late, giving passengers first thing in the morning, if you've got a common route, the whole engagement with your passengers. How you monetize that may well be, it's not necessarily selling apps, for example. That isn't the model, it's not the 99p download. It is basically better engagement with your customers. Take the local transport authority here, Merseyrail run the rail transport here on Merseyside. You can use Merseyrail every day of your life, and they know nothing about you. My wife used to use Merseyrail. She used to get on Merseyrail every day of that. They knew nothing about you. She paid cash, they knew nothing. She got off the train, went into Tesco's. Tesco's know everything. They know how many people we have for Christmas. Absolutely, to the and that's the difference. They've started to wake up the rail industry to the power of the analysts. If I want to sell you more stuff, I want to have more offers, I want to engage you as a customer, I've got to have that. But to do that, the customer's got to get a value proposition, and that comes out of the data. So.
So I'm slightly lazy of me, you'll excuse that. Talking about, we're talking about transport, and you mentioned a killer app. Can you explain to me the application that is exercising the minds of our taxi drivers?
Oh, right. Yeah. What it does and what the issue is.
And why it's so disruptive.
As I understand it, and as I say, it's not really, but as I understand it, what they've done, they've decoded the metering system in taxis, so the end user now can determine what the cost of a journey is. So they can now pull any taxi driver into, and indeed share taxis into it. So the idea of the monopoly of a registered taxi having a registered meter has been undermined, because people can now call taxis based upon location. They can define what the fare will be from that location. And that's seen, I think, as a threat to the model where we have licensed taxis who have a licensed tariff. So you would use them in preference because they are known to have a license cost. The license now effectively has been given back to the end user. It's an interesting, it goes into a much broader issue in that it's basically been transported from San Francisco, where it's been very successful, where the taxis in a way are differently regulated. They are regulated, but differently regulated. And I think there is a cultural clash there about and unequivocally, this is a changing world, and there are, not everybody wins in the new world. There are some things that will be less, will be commoditized, and in a way, it is that commoditization of the taxi. I think is the heart of that. And if you're a licensed person, it's interesting, if you talk to London cabbies, they still do the knowledge. Now, why you would need to do that with GPS, but they all have to do that. So you've invested for 2 years to learn how to do that. So you feel you've qualified and you've done. If we suddenly sort of wiped out degree level qualifications, and I had some sort of new protein that I could give you, which was the equivalent of a degree level qualification kind of idea. People with degree level qualifications would be a bit miffed about technological advance. If everybody got one just by taking in, it's that kind of thing. There's a technological advance here which is disturbing a market that people have invested in. So they're some of the kind of social implications. It's not, it isn't all for the good, but winners and losers.
Dennis, thank you very much indeed, sir. Well, Dennis has just done me a great favour, in fact, because two of the use cases, he's covered one of them marvellously well in terms of the A14 Project Stride programme. So, just want to quickly whip through it, would seem. Hyper reality, the very fact that so many of us are here today seems to make that a bit of a nonsensical question. How can it be a hype? If we're all here, because we're all very worthwhile and useful people doing lots of useful things. I'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll whip through the sources of data that inform, hopefully, some real-world use cases, and touch on what BT's current strategic pathway is, and that changes from day to day, as you might expect, and then a summary as to where we are and where we're off to next. So, I had an epiphany about 2 weeks ago. I've just come out on a Friday afternoon of another interminably long Internet of Things, machine-to-machine, smart cities, and whatever other phrase we could throw around the room to decide what our strategy was. And that was great. As I'm driving home, I'm thinking, is there any mileage in this? I've got a few years to do. Why am I bothering? Is there something real? And then I had an epiphany. I flipped on the radio.
See, I always knew precision technology was the future of agriculture, but I didn't realise how advanced the thinking had gone.
Satellites, drones, high-resolution sensors, exciting stuff, sure.
It's not so long since the idea of GPS in tractors sounded like science fiction, but now, farmers who don't use it are in a minority.
Well, those new sensors are a fascinating development, if only they were a bit clever.
Look, if a machine can sense the problem before we've even noticed it, it can be programmed to take action.
Well, machines won't solve everything. If the computer says yes, but the weather says no.
Get yourself more sophisticated software.
You're really sold on all this, aren't you?
Robots that could phase harvest and seed depth to moisture? You bet I am.
They will drive down inputs and materials costs.
Another of my hobby horses, you're going to say?
So, pop quiz. Where was that from? Excellent. I'm not the only old fella in the room then in that case. That's good. Great demographic. That for me, in a nutshell, is the Internet of Things. In a major mainstream soap opera saying, hey, I've got a business problem. I've no idea what seed depth issues are. Why would I? I hate gardening at the best of times. But I do know what input costs and such like are, and they're important. So if I can reduce those, kind of like it. That says to me, if we're at this stage, yes, there's something here. Perhaps we're not quite at hype. Also, hell, it's in the press, we're here, this is good stuff. And more importantly, some great funding is being applied to it. So Glasgow, on the back of the Smart City Incubator, £24 million, Milton Keynes rather, Smart City. MK Smart, £16 million of hefty funding, we like that. Smart City in Bristol, London and Peterborough, I might add, got £3 million each on the back of it. All really, really decent chunky numbers. That's Amsterdam, by the way. I don't know how much they got, but based on some of the stuff they're doing, quite a bit. So you tend to look at it and think, yeah, this is real. It's in the press, we're talking driverless cars, battery-driven buses in Milton Keynes. Really, really exciting. Why are you questioning this, Jeremy? There's money available, there's political will at a national and a local level, and there's lots of lovely industry people such as ourselves, and academics, I might add, apologies, all very, very keen to pursue and push this. Why would I possibly doubt it? Well, actually, I don't think it's so much is it a hype or is it real. I feel like we're in a phase at the moment that's a bit like a phony war that says we've got lots of resources, lots of impetus, but we're not quite sure the direction we're going in. And certainly what I'm hearing today is really, or this morning even, is sort of evidence to support that view, I would suggest. In terms of the market, we spend quite a lot of cash on getting various marketing people in to tell us which direction to go in or suggest and recommend. But when you look at, on the left here, you can't see, apologies, we've got what, 2, 4, 6, 8 insight analysts, all giving us various projections in terms of machine-to-machine revenue growth from here to 2020. But if you look at the spread there, and that's indicative of the problem as well. Big, big numbers, but is it 20 billion or is it 120 billion? Well, why would I care? That's a big, healthy number. The problem is when we come back to individual use cases and actually getting stuff done, and Dennis made the point absolutely beautifully, what value are we bringing to the debate? How do we productize and how do we commercialize? How do we actually make money? Because ultimately it's that. Certainly, apologies. Maybe it's just my company, I doubt it very much, but that's what gets stuff done, is making money. In terms of where, various ways of looking at it, at the moment it's shaping up that governments and smart cities are the driver, but off of the back of that, and obviously interrelated, because we are an Internet of Things, is the question of healthcare, particularly energy and utilities, which is a core interest of mine. Along the back of that, it starts to get a bit looser around what the SME and enterprise engagement is. Yes, there's some manufacturing there, machine to machine particularly leads you in that direction, but it gets a bit grayer, I would suggest. And in terms of the sources of data, well, anywhere and everywhere. We'll have sensors on all the wall plugs, the lights, the ceiling tiles, so that if one falls down, I'll know, and I can dispatch an operator to fix it, sweet. The list is endless, but the challenge, particularly from an Internet of Things perspective, is how do we pick the runners and riders appropriately that we really address the sweet spot of where the value lies, both commercially or societally. So there is a citizen stroke consumer here. So which data set should we choose that allows to exploit the potential for value? So taking an example of that, independently we can solve a traffic congestion problem. We might like to link that to a smart road because that's quite useful. So if I've got congestion, that says if I smarten up how I measure the roads and what's going on there, that could be quite interesting. And implied within that, is, of course, is also smart parking. Now you could approach those as independent projects should you wish. If I'm brutally honest, we are doing that in some ways because for reasons of scale and cost, you can't always bite them all off at once. But the real secret and art of this, from a macro perspective, is how do we link up all of those data sets to produce even more value, actionable, insightful value, both to society, the individual and firms. Now, I've got lots of questions, but sadly, from your perspective, I guess, very, very few answers. Okay, but we're working. The other consideration here is the partnership. So we like to think we bring a fairly strong and deep portfolio in terms of both networking services and other products and services. But we recognise that there are certainly niches within this, and I look to your good self in terms of how we can sort of partner up on that. Dennis, somewhat pleasingly, if not ironic, because it's the first time we've actually met today, and that should tell you something as well, we're partnering with niche players in certain respects, because we do bring some fantastic strength to bear. We're keenly aware we can't do it alone. And that adds a problem of its own as well, which says, well, who leads? If you actually get to the point of, yes, we can provide some value and we think it's got commercial potential, who actually takes that to market? And there's all sorts of things implied within that, not least of which scale. So BT, we have a fairly decent footprint in the UK. One of the problems or it's less a problem, more of a decision, I would suggest, is what we actually take to market. So it may be, we're in what, 26 million homes. That's a great place to be, in one way, shape or form. But the question as to what other goods and services we want to take into those homes is really key to our brand. So it's not just a question of what technically you can do, whether you can make any money out of it, it's, well, actually, how much do we want to risk, certainly on an innovative new adventure, our brand. So we might decide at certain points to take a step back. That's not a bad thing. But again, if you're a smaller company, how to get the scale, not easy, I would suggest. So, moving from the macro to the micro in some respects, Project Stride even, is our East of England congestion corridor project, which we've discussed at some length and detail, which is good. But this is a fine example of partnership. We couldn't have done this on our own. Yeah, we were able to build a sensing network up and down the A14. We're quite good at that. So quite a long experience in that. What we couldn't have done is start to understand some of the implications in terms of logistically, what pressures are on the port authorities, how do they keep ships out at sea, what happens in terms of logistics companies with trucks running up and down if there's a major congestion point, and how do the two talk currently, but more interestingly, what value add could we bring if we're starting to detect what's going on, build that into a meaningful dialogue and open it up to other players, not least of which the emergency services and the maintenance services, the AA and such like, and roadside services. So we couldn't have done all that on our own. One, we don't simply have the understanding, so there's some place for academia here. Two, there are some niche products and services in terms of how they would be built, so therefore we need to pull in a pool of smaller players as well. Given the core backbone, yes, we can do that as well, but having said that, even within our networking operations, we have certain limitations around less what we can do, but what we choose to do, given cost and time and resource. In terms of the Stride applications, driver behaviour, journey time planning, traffic instant alerting, you would expect all of those, and indeed some of those are available as apps today on your iPhone. Just download it from the App Store, why not? But again, it's the power of pulling them together in a commercial context and also inviting in a collaboration of partners and players, not just for those delivering, but for those using. Emergency services, the logistical companies, and the ports. I'll move swiftly on, if I may, to Milton Keynes. So Milton Keynes, a trial at scale. That phrase scale worries me at times. Just how big is it? Is it 5 houses, or is it 55 or 55,000? What we're trying to do here is, Milton Keynes is a great city. The idea of the project for MK Smart is to say how does Milton Keynes secure its economic future over the next 10, 15, 20 years? Okay, no bigger horizon than that. So it's a good mixture of urban and non-urban terrain. That allows us to do a number of things from a technical perspective, which is test a whole variety of city sensor networks and urban networks as well. Test a variety of sensors in a whole host of different applications. Not coincidentally, they tend to mirror what's in the business information and skills report as to what a smart city might reflect in transport, energy, water, etc. And also, there's some learnings around that partner environment and the ecosystem there. What is missing is we have the OU on board from an academic perspective, as well as others. But it's, again, who does what within the partnership, and what sort of problems do you face, not just the technical, in terms of solving county-wide issues and taking them to market. Now, on the back of this, there's a good degree, I would suggest, for BT to play that says a whole bunch of sensors right across the piece, and we can sense whichever we want and come up with some interesting ideas. That's not what we're interested in. Well, we are sort of. What we're really interested is in what we can make money out of. And there I've said it. I've come out of the closet. How can we make cash out of this stuff? Because without this equation being solved, we don't deploy any networks. Why would you? Some of the more interesting ones, and I'll dwell on some of the specifics in a moment, but some of the more interesting ones are not readily apparent, and this I find really exciting in terms of the Internet of Things. So, for example, pest control. Not unusually, Milton Keynes has a significant pest problem, rats. Who doesn't these days? And I see a few even outside of my flat. To actually service that problem, put out the traps with baits, the whole regulation that surrounds how often you check that and make sure that it's safe for the community and such like. It's a whole world of pain to deal with, and not least of which cost. So a truck roll sends a guy out checking the rat traps on an individual basis on a certain program. Really, really non-trivial. So somebody said, well, maybe we had a smart rat trap. And it's no smarter than having a sensor that says, blimey, Sid the rat's just strolled in. Quick, send out a guy, dispatch him humanely, or whatever they do with them before anyone says it. I don't know how you deal with a rat you caught. But you send the guy out, we've just caught a rat, and he deals with it. Or indeed, we know that, because the sensor's there, we put fresh poison down 2 weeks ago, it's due a cycle, go back and check. So suddenly we're starting to get a really more meaningful and value-added relationship in terms of how we manage our rat problem. Now that was small, I thought, but the reason I like that is you can quantify it quite specifically. You know what the truck roll costs, you know what your labour costs are, you know how many rats you're catching or not, as the case may be. So you can start to build on paper a business case before you've even deployed any form of solution. And that is an approach we particularly like. For example, the in-home monitors is a live project for us at the moment. Had about a 3-hour audio call last week. It was very exciting, where we were debating what sensor network would we use. If you've got high-rise, low-rise, wavelength penetration, stuff that I'm not a technical guy by any stretch, bored me to tears, frankly. What excited me was when we got to, well, hang on a tick, how much time does an engineer spend in the home? Roughly, he's given about 45 minutes to go in, check the boiler once a year, tap it, yep, it's still okay. Put a sensor in, yep, okay, the fumes are good, it's all working within parameters, it's still reasonably efficient, great, he's off for another year. Like a massive rolling program of these visits. If we could shave off 50% of the time he spends in there and double the amount of visits he could do, your maths is far better than I, this is suddenly getting quite interesting from a commercial perspective. So we're not into what's the penetration of networks and sensors. That we'll get to, that's quite interesting at a later point. What I really want to know today is what's the economic impact of our being able to bring this solution to bear. Don't know that yet, got to find it out. So everyone on the call sort of got all depressed with me and said, yeah, but we want to know the network. No, we'll get there. Okay, let's spend some time working out even a headline business case that we can take to a customer and say, give the word customer, apologies, an old and bad habit, trying to get off. Take to a customer and say, this is what you spend, this is what we think you can save by doing this, which will cost you X. And the equation is no more complex than that. If we can do it, will you sign up to it? And if the answer is a fervent yes, then everything else falls into place. Everybody is happy. Them, us, other partners in the triage, it's good news all round. Okay, so back to this phony war. I do have a real fear that sometimes ourselves, and I don't know about yourself, we become subsidy junkies. We do projects which are really interesting and exciting because they're really interesting and exciting, and we're really interesting and exciting people. You know, maybe that's overstating it, I don't know. It certainly is for me to an extent. But we become subsidy junkies just because the money's available and just because something looks a good reason to be done isn't always the case. And do you know what? As big a company as BT are, we still have limitations around the resource and the money we can apply. So we've got to be really, really careful about how we approach the market and what we do. The Internet of Things, to Dennis's point, opportunities are endless. That's not much good to me. Not when I'm within a frame or a payback horizon of 12 months, let alone 24. You know, it's really, really harsh reality time here. So in terms of the use cases, it breaks down into the street infrastructure primarily as being really, really good. And I love this one. And yourself with the Enlight relationship was good to see. I love this because, again, back to the cost payback issue. Local authorities, broadly speaking, average 20 to 25% of their costs go on energy. And of that 20 to 25%, around about 10 to 15% is just put street lights on. Okay? And that's a non-trivial amount of money. So if you can turn down a street light by 2 to 3%, actually we won't notice as humans. That's quite a chunk off the bill. So that's sort of getting interesting. Oh, and by the way, the carbon saving, that's getting quite interesting as well. So everyone's feeling good about this. But the really exciting thing is, such is technology, if you were to retrofit all of the street lamps with the appropriate ballast, you can not only just control smartly the lighting arrangements, determined by street flow, time of day, or whichever other metrics you want to put around it, you can turn that street lamp into a Wi-Fi hotspot. So if you've got a number of strung Wi-Fi hotspots, suddenly, ooh, what could we do there? Well, we can we can gather some weather data. Because that'd be really good, because if you've got a microclimate and you want to sense what the air quality is, see if there's any asthma problems in the area, if they gather around particular hotspots for air quality, that could be interesting. Well, we can do that. At the same time, we're saving a bottom line case on the energy costs of the street lamp. Equally, we could have some motion detection. So back to the congestion in urban setting. Great, we can see what's rolling past and at what pace and whether it's stood still. We can hook that up to some intelligent digital signage that says if there is a problem somewhere in the city, somewhere in the area, well, that's fine. We can give you local traffic information. And so a sum of the parts starts to get really, really, really exciting, I think. It starts off with a firm underlying business case of we can save you X on your energy budget, through to, but here are the possibility of value-add applications. Elsewhere, smart parking. And I'm not sure how I feel about this one. So on the upside, it's a new service for me to be able to book my car parking space, not get hassled or bound into a pocket full of change when I get out, and to make sure if I don't come back on time, that's no problem, I'll automatically extend the parking charge when I'm out. You could, on the flip side, argue that it's an easier way to monitor who's in the space for how long and dispatch fewer parking attendants at a more appropriate time and more accurately. Okay. Now the reason I bring that up as an issue is we talk technically, we talk commercially. I believe the Internet of Things has great potential, but none of this comes to naught if we don't engage with the population appropriately, be it as citizens, as consumers, and actually get them bought in. Now the good news here, I think, is, from my perspective, I guess I work in the industry, so it sort of interests me still. I'm sort of inclined to go along and try stuff. My kids, like yours, I'm sure, if you have them, it's just a no-brainer. They will burn you in a heartbeat if you get it wrong, but get it right. And do you know what? They'll use it, they'll tell everyone else about it, they'll Twitter the hell out of it, they'll Facebook the hell out of it, and suddenly you're up and running very quickly. So in terms of the impetus, because I do think there's, we talk big budgets, £1 million programs, but I do believe there are challenges around how quickly we can get some of these value-add ideas to market. Because if we achieve and succeed those, then it would just provide a springboard. So again, I use this to illustrate more how the considerations aren't just technical. It really is how you engage a value proposition to a populace. I'm not saying I have all the ideas around how you might solve that. Having worked in the CRM field for some time, I've got a couple. Developing the theme in terms of measurements, if you wish, and the value add. What I particularly like around Milton Keynes is there's a whole raft of measurement criteria in terms of whether they're going to be a success or not. We see some of the metrics in terms of, from a technical perspective, what the events and data sets are going to do. Grow exponentially, is that fair to say? Actually, it's quite small. You might be thinking, it's quite tentative. What interests me more are some of the more subjective. So, for example, they have a committed intention that within 3 years of the project beginning, they will have 5 schools using the data sensing and telemetry and analytics to basically to prove the project use from an educational or local school perspective. Now, I don't know quite what that means yet, but it feels that's good. We're not just measuring technically or financially. There is a social benefit implied there as well. They also wish 20 SMEs, because I think it's easy to be grand and big about big companies, it comes naturally. They have 20 SMEs that they also want using the business analytics that will be generated by all of this data. Again, not quite clear in what. You're thinking we are trying to provide as much value across the piece as possible. And they want around about 50,000 students to be registered for MOOC, Massive Online Open Courseware. Now, I find that really, really interesting and exciting. I'm chatting to a fellows in the education market in the plenary this morning. There's some real scope here. Again, not quite sure for what, but if you look at what's happening in the States in terms of MOOC, and that's only going to be mirrored here. Milton Keynes, as you would expect, as the open university. Again, it's just another metric that says, how do we wring every drop out of the programme? Commercially, economically, socially. So, what's BT's strategic pathway? Big and complex and all-encompassing, as you would expect. Actually, what we're trying to do, and this is a vision, we're not engaged in projects right across every piece here, we simply haven't got the bandwidth ourselves. But pretty much, as Dennis alluded to, we're trying to ourselves pick particular sweet spots. The connected home is one vision, 26 million customers, many of which, sadly not all I would argue, have the home hub, which is a fantastic piece of kit. It's nothing more than an applications platform, it's not just a router. So you can start to look into the home and say, well, supposing we wanted to provide a suite of services other than just broadband. Now some of those might be energy related, so in-home energy management. BT has actually got a building energy management network that we've rolled out over 5,500 buildings. We're the 7th largest energy consumer in UK. We really do get how to manage energy. Quite aside from the fact we can show you how to manage it in your home. That could be interesting. Tell you what, a few more very low-level cheap sensors. Some on your windows, some on your doors. That sounds quite good for a low-cost entry-level security option in the home. Yeah, quite like that, Jeremy. What happens if I go away and step out the home and drive off? Well, that's okay, because the home hub can detect you're there. It has presence ability. If you've got a mobile, it'll know you're at home. If you walk out the door and drive off, it will check your sensors and send you a text saying you've left the window open. So there's some possibilities there around connected home. Technically doable. You can have them tomorrow. In fact, I would argue some of them are already out there in one way, shape or form. The question is it economically viable? Can we make some money? And again, do we want to risk our brand if things go well, particularly in that energy, where there's a tantalising opportunity, but get it wrong, and we know the PR kickback can be somewhat painful, to say the least. Elsewhere, we're engaged in smart cities. We're working on Milton Keynes. I think there's 7 other cities around the UK we're engaged with in varying degrees, Glasgow being the latest on the streets, potentially a street lighting application. Smart living, again, we've had telehealth and telecare solutions for a long time, and what we're trying to do, or thinking about doing, is repurposing some of those in the home. Because again, why wouldn't you? It sort of fits. If you want to call it the Internet of Things, the fact that we were looking at this 7 years ago is irrelevant, who cares? Maybe it was not of its time then, let's just reuse and repurpose now and get to market quickly. So some of the learns then, in summary, we know that despite our power in terms of network capability, it's not one size fits all, sadly. It'd be nice and easy if it were. So we're going to have to look to partner with some and also decide at a given point what is our preferred network topology. So GSM's fairly ubiquitous and out there at the moment, but lots of radio could be useful, particularly for low-cost commodity applications, I would argue. The key there is this question of interoperability. It's not just our network. It's lots and lots of people. Some will be our competitors, and we've experience in working with that, unsurprisingly. But we need to know how we mitigate that, because if we don't do that mitigation appropriately, how on earth can you start to benefit from the Internet of Things? Because suddenly that Internet of Things gets very, very, very insular, down to competing factors, I would argue. The Common Information Platform and Data Hub are fairly fundamental. In Milton Keynes, it really is the underpinning factor. The Data Hub, it's really a state-of-the-art, curator, allowing you to acquire data and manage it on a very, very broad spectrum. So a variety of networks for a variety of sensors. And the last is this question, I didn't really know how to best term it, accelerated innovation model. That sounds like some mad marketeer's just lost his mind. Really it is the question of partnership. And it's not just a partnership in terms of who you're delivering the solutions with, but it's who you're delivering the solutions for, be they business and consumer and or citizen. And that, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some significant issues around that and challenges which we need to think about. Overarching that is, of course, the questions of security and use of data policies, which again, if we're not careful, we know, I nearly said the Daily Mail, that would be unkind of me, but some papers can get quite excited about this question of security and privacy and use of data. Massive benefits, but there's also an inherent nervousness as well. But the size of the prize, 1.5 trillion by 2020. That's a lot of money, I believe. That was Frost & Sullivan earlier this year. Equally, I think it was the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills that came up with a 4 billion number at about the same time, to give you some degree of scope on it. 4 billion of which they reckon 10% addressable by UK. I don't know, but the numbers of a magnitude are feeling significant enough. The big question is whether, as a company, and indeed as a community, we can actually realise it. So, we started with a pop quiz of sorts, if you wish. Where to next? Does anyone know what this is?
Internet.
Oh, top man. So, that is the internet, or at least it was in December 1969. And I look at this because sometimes we get a bit blasé, I feel, and forget because you're immersed in this stuff a lot. So that was the internet in 1969. If you look at the internet today, how do you even begin to map it rationally, let alone do something with it? So if I just leave that as a pause for reflection and say thank you for your time.
Okay, hello, my name is Kuijk. I'm from Japan, working for NTT. It's a big telco in Japan, but it's not well known in here. Original name is Nippon is Japan, telegraph and telephone. Still we are using the name of a telegraph. It's already 20 years ago, it should be abolished. But let me explain about that today. It's not so directly related to the Internet of Things, but it's how we supporting for this kind of a trend, which let me explain. So NTT is one of the biggest carrier in the world. So we have around 200,000 employees, ranked in 32 in Fortune Global 500. So it's a big telecom, but it's mainly we are focusing on the Asian side. We have some significant existence for NTT data here, and dimension data for the, how to say, corporate enterprise, customer side premises. So I just briefly review the network trend. Maybe some of them are very specialist, so it's a very easy one. Before 1995, you can say much more before, much more later, but it's called a telephone switch to define network. It means telephone switch is the key for the network at that time. Since scarcity exists for circuit, right? But of course, optical fiber changing everything. First telco, we are so happy for the optical fiber, but finally we found it's really risk for us. So, I'm just using the rise of a distributed network. It's published by David Eisenberg in 1997. They are saying that 1997, but it's a David Eisenberg said that. Now, it's not a PC, but a CPE, customer's premises switches control everything. So, he's saying that telco, you do not need to switch anymore. You just carry. You just invest for the optical fiber and carry and carry and carry. Don't try to switch. This is what the customer side will do it. So we are forced to change in that way. And the internet, it's, we cannot charge for the distance. Whatever in the next door to the Japan, the cost is the same, right? For the user. We are having a very difficulty for that one. And then now, anyway, it's called a software-defined network. How it's changed, I think it's also another change is coming. Who grabbed the market is very different. It's meant that like network function virtualization, which is more now feasible. And the intelligent used to be the network side, coming to the customer side. Now it's back into the network, or you can say for cloud side. So this is the trend. So this is just easy to, how to say, illustrate. This is suppose one enterprise company have a location ABC, and some of the place they have a data center. It used to be they don't have outsourced data center. Usually they have a server room and do it. Then data center is coming outside. Some customer just for collocating some of the third-party data center. And if you can say, this one is more like a cloud now. This means they don't want to collocate. They just outsource everything for their server side. But still, customers, location-wise, they have to manage by themselves. So let's say like one accelerator or firewall is how to say all the devices located in their how to say building or offices. So they need an IT manager for each side because it's really complicated. I don't know if there's a Cisco guys or not. All the guys need some Cisco iOS operator in each side. So this is the trend. But now what I'm saying for software-defined network, now all the guys try to put into the, how to say, network controller in the cloud. And in the cloud, this person, whether this is the customer's company A or operator, full outsourced operator, can control everything from one side, from the portal. This is what is coming. So in this case, what will happen? This one accelerator file or any other thing is going to the cloud. And then they do not need to this kind of function anymore for the customer's premise. It means the device do not necessarily put in place in the customer side. Operator not necessary to sit into their side. So this is the how to say the trend, and maybe everything is controlled by the network controller by the operator, one operator, globally in a sense. So some I think paradigm shift is now coming. Who grab the market? Maybe I will explain later. So it's another slide to describe for this one. This is our not necessary, but it's our network. And our some of like a cloud. And this is something like a customer's places. If you can see your how to say server room, there is a IP PBX, antivirus, URL, IPS, authentication, all the how to say legacy machines stuck in. So what will happen now is everything's now going to the cloud side or network side. So what you left in the customer side is only one router. So we are now trying to making this kind of situation happen for simple and lower total cost of ownership and rapid service activation. So we are now operating for this network side from US, the software developer in US and India. For server side, we have many very software architects in Cornwall, in UK, and London. They are providing all the, how to say, worldwide network and, how to say, cloud side. So this is our network for internet, IP backbone, not so well known, but we are the second largest IP provider in the world, next to the level 3. Of course, we are the Asian carrier, so Asia US or Asia Europe is the biggest one. So 835 gigs are really the tough now challenge for us because anyhow, not so many submarine cables available. It's only now 4 systems working for how to say one route. So I came here for 2 years ago, but 3 years ago I was head of IP backbone network in Japan. And at that time, earthquake hits, and the tsunami, how to say, destroy our whole network in a sense. And this network, many other Asian countries, South Asian countries also rely on us. It means we are picking up there like the traffic and carrying to US or wherever. So this is also our challenge at that time. And of course, we are duplicated for our network, but still we are barely possible at that time. We recovered everything in only 12 hours, so not so many congested, but still it was really the challenge. So it's really interesting that there are so many SNS the provider in Japan located, but at that time the best one is the Twitter located in Nevada, and which we carry everything from US to Japan. It's something like a network feature for that one. So utilizing this one, and the data center side, of course, as I said, we have the big one in Slough and the Hemel Hempstead in UK. This is our strategy to put the data center in UK and providing it to Europe, but like a Snowden incident changing the strategy, it's really affected because all the German guy really doesn't want to put the data in UK anymore. So we are still struggling, but like Salesforce put all the data in UK for all Europe data. And the other one, we are also heavily investing in another one for Hemel Hempstead 3, which will be ready for service for next year with the 4,000 racks. So network, data center, and on top of that, it's our cloud network. Everything's very identical, cloud all over the world. In Europe now, only Germany and UK is available, and we are now starting investing in Spain and France. So this is something like try to help some of the IP provider, enterprise customer or some application provider who direct to serve to the worldwide. So this is our strategy. But again, who try to grab the market for network control side is different. We are trying to, some other guys trying to, especially for the vendor side or some other telco. Or if you look back the history about like cloud, right? Nobody believed that Amazon will come to this kind of market. They did. So it might change. And so maybe these 5 years, 3-5 years, these are very fighting each other, I think. Maybe if you have some opinion, let's discuss about that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Alexander. The issue, cloud, and cloud storage and territoriality. My personal opinion is these are issues that concern people who don't understand how networks work. You know, you make a phone call, it will go 2.5 times around the planet before and I could be calling you there.
Sure.
But surely this must be some sort of business opportunity. I mean, if territories are saying, no, the cloud storage needs to be within our confines, that's a lot of data centers.
Exactly, but after I come here, how still some such kind of barriers exist. I really understand France is France, Germany insisting we have a data center here, we should have it.
Absolutely. I blame the Article 26 working group. Don't say it. Right, we are, thank you very much. Thank you.